The presidential election just finished almost over 2 weeks ago, with Donald Trump now in the lead by a little under 2 points in the popular vote. What is going to happen in the 2028 presidential election? We're going to be exploring that today. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. We're going to be taking another early look at the Electoral College map for the 2028 presidential election. Hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this. Looking at the betting odds for the Republican nomination, JD Vance currently sits at 54% odds to win the Republican GOP slot, with Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump Jr. as the runner-ups for the slot. The Democrat primary is a little bit more divided, with Gavin being the slight plurality favorite here in the betting odds to win the Democrat primary, with Josh Shapiro at 15% to Gretchen Whitmer's 13% as of right now. And so since Gavin Newsom and JD are the front runners for each party nomination, we will be seeing a JD versus Gavin Newsom matchup in the 2028 election as of right now. Some key factors to point out is that this is very, very early. I like to do these for sport, for fun. These predictions are for fun, but also I take these very, very seriously. Again, this is obviously not a final prediction. This is an early look at the matchup, and I'm not even using any polling data for this. I'm using my own instinctive analysis, given the results that we have on the electoral map, given the swingometer that I played around with here. This is what I'm kind of noticing right now for the 2028 race. I think Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana are going to be in that safe Republican column, no problem. JD is going to do especially well with non-college whites. We see here all of Nebraska, except the first congressional district. I actually think that's going to be in the likely column. The state of Nebraska has been trending left the past couple of years now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that occur again. Looking at Kansas, I think this is still going to be in the safe column, including Utah. I actually think Utah right now is only about a 21-point victory for Trump, but I think that JD would do significantly better than Donald Trump in a state like Utah. I think JD probably wins it by about 30 points in 2028. You'll see a little bit of a reversion there. Gavin is an extraordinarily weak candidate for religious type voters, and JD is especially more of a positive candidate for those kind of voters. And so I do actually think that JD would do significantly better in a place like Utah compared to Donald Trump. Oklahoma, I think that's going to be safe. Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri are going to be in the safe Republican column, including Mississippi. However, I do expect Louisiana and Mississippi to trend to the left quite significantly this cycle. We also see the states of Iowa, Ohio in this column as of right now. They are not in the safe Republican column. The state of South Carolina, I also think, will be in the safe Republican column as well. And now we see for the safe Democrat states, California is going to be in the safe Democrat column, guys. We see right here that Kamala's winning it by about 21 points. And yes, Donald Trump did make improvements, and I would expect JD to have a somewhat similar performance. But as of right now, I do think that the margin would be fairly similar to this. I also think that a state like Oregon and Washington, given Gavin's popularity in the West, as well as him being from California, I do actually think he could win Oregon and Washington by about over 15-point wins. I also think Colorado, by that point, you're going to have a lot of Californian transplants over there. Kamala won the state by about 12 points. I do think that Gavin is going to do slightly better in the national popular vote than Kamala Harris will. And so I do expect a place like Colorado to be in the fully safe Democrat column by the time we get to the 2028 election. I also think that states, for example, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, and the District of Columbia will be in the safe column, including Maine's first congressional district. However, I do think it'll actually narrow up from the 2024 presidential election. I do think it would actually get closer, and I think that Maine second would actually probably end up getting a little bit more Republican as well. They're coming in at about maybe 12 points for JD, so the state would get slightly closer. However, I do still see it being probably about a 4 to 5 point win for Gavin Newsom, so we could probably put that in the likely Democrat column as of right now. I do see the state of Florida being a completely safe Republican state going into 2028, as well as the state of Texas. I do think JD would improve on Trump's margin with Hispanics quite a bit. That is a group that is moving away from the Democrats due to economic policy, as well as the social issue of transgenderism and the LGBTQ plus community. And so I do think because of that, we actually are going to see a very, very hard right trend in Texas and Florida. I think JD would do especially well in rural Florida, but I also think in some areas like Miami-Dade, West Palm Beach, he could probably improve on Trump's margins. Maybe you'll see some regression for JD in some of the northern parts of Florida. Maybe Tallahassee is a little bit harsh on JD possibly, but places like Orange County could get very competitive. The state's going to be moving even more to the right heading into the 2020 election. I would expect a very easy win for JD in a place like Duval County. I really think that it would probably end up being a slam dunk win of about 2 to 3 points in Duval. And we see here as of right now that Donald Trump won the county by about a point and change. I think JD probably wins Duval by like 2 to 3 points, which is very telling for a state like Georgia, which has a pretty decent correlation with Duval County. I think that Iowa and Ohio would be in the higher column here in the safe. You could possibly see Ohio be in the safe Republican column, given that Gavin would be an extraordinarily weak candidate for these kind of Appalachian rural areas. The fact that this is JD's home state, it could potentially be in that safe column. We did see it become an 11-point victory for Donald Trump going into the 2024 presidential election. And I think that JD would probably do outstandingly well in a place like Ohio. So it's definitely possible that we see a safe Ohio heading into 2028. Iowa would probably be anywhere from the 11 to 15 point range as of right now. I could see it narrowly being under 15. Maybe it is actually over a 15 win. For the sake of this video, we'll probably just put it at a little bit over 15 points for JD Vance. We will see here in a place like Delaware and Rhode Island, I do actually expect safe margins of victory for Gavin in those places. However, a place like Connecticut, I think would actually be in the likely Democrat column as of right now. Maybe even a place like Delaware could even be in the likely column for this video. I do think a place like Hawaii will probably be safe. Alaska, I think, will get closer. It did trend to the left this cycle. Once again, it was only a 14-point win for Donald Trump. And regardless of ranked choice voting, I do think that it's going to move to the left. I think somebody like Gavin may actually perform a little bit better in the state of Alaska compared to other Democrat nominees. Vance probably wins it by 9 to 12 points in the 2028 election. And so we see Vance with the floor of 219 electoral college votes. Now, I do actually think going into this, since Vance is outperforming Trump with Hispanics, I think that Arizona and Nevada at that point would be likely margins of victory. We saw that in the state of Nevada that Donald Trump narrowly lost Clark and Washoe. JD would more than likely completely sweep the state of Nevada, take all of the counties, and Arizona JD would just crush Gavin by an astounding maybe possibly 6 to 8 points in the state of Arizona and Nevada. We see that JD would probably perform slightly better with subgroups of, Black and Hispanic voters, but you may actually end up seeing some improvement with Gavin with some college white voters. And this is maybe Arizona's under 5 just because of the fact that the college educated group may shift a little bit to the left next cycle for Gavin, a little bit. So Nevada may be the state that actually is in the likely column. They have a much higher non-college educated population. So you could actually see that be the case where Nevada is the likely Republican state and Arizona is a little bit closer. It's probably a 3 to 4 point win for Vance. The state of Georgia, I think, is going to be a very, very tight battleground state. I could actually see it being a tilt state, but because of the fact Vance is doing significantly better with blacks, probably 2 to 3 points better with blacks than Donald Trump, and the fact that the electorate here in the state of Georgia is a lot more African American, about 25 to 30%. we are going to see some shift to JD in those Atlanta areas. Now, the suburbs are going to continue to trend left. Gavin may underperform Harris in some of those suburbs, may move some of them left. I think North Carolina, a similar story, probably a 3 to 4 point win, kind of similar to 2024 as of right now, believe it or not. Now, going into this election, I do actually think that New Mexico may be in the likely column. It's probably a 7 to 8 point victory for Gavin. You are going to see Hispanics move more Republican, but those college-educated whites in Albuquerque are going to move the state away from J.D. Vance. So that is also a big problem. But non-college educated voters are moving the state to the right with Hispanics as well. I think that later on, coming into this, now, it really depends on how successful the administration is, because New York and Illinois, I think, would be likely Democrat states. I think that JD could possibly improve here from Donald Trump. It's very possible that that would be the case. However, with sitting vice presidents, it's very hard for a sitting vice president to actually win a presidential election. Is very difficult, and they tend to underperform the top of the ticket from the previous cycle. However, Illinois and New York, the trends are very strong there, and a lot of that has to do with illegal immigration. It is a big problem. A lot of it has to do with illegal immigration. Donald Trump is losing the state of Illinois by roughly 10. I think Vance loses it by 6 to 7. You're going to see that Appalachian appeal kind of bleed into here. It could potentially be a swing state going into 2028, depending on how strong Vance's Rust Belt appeal is. But now looking at a place like New York, I think that Vance could probably get that down to 7 to 8. He would do even better than Donald Trump in some of the city areas. Maybe some suburban areas move left, but those city areas moving right are going to be a big problem for the Democrats. And in the late 2030s, New York may potentially be a swing state. Going to the state of Virginia, I actually think Vance probably does slightly worse in the suburbs of Virginia. We saw here that, some city areas in Virginia actually moved to the right, but a lot of these suburbs here in Fairfax ended up moving to the left this time, and I think that's going to continue once again. And so about a 6 to 7 point win for Gavin in the state of Virginia is probably on the way. Looking at the District of Nebraska second, you're going to see here, it was actually a 4 point win for Kamala Harris, but I think that Gavin would probably do way better here, 6 to 7 points. I also believe that in the Rust Belt, Gavin is just a fatal candidate in the Rust Belt because of the fact that you are going to see major underperformances with Rust Belt voters. Gavin does not appeal to that kind of subgroup. I would actually expect going into this, the state of New Hampshire is a very anti-incumbent state. If we look here, we clearly see that as of right now, the state is about a 3 point loss for Donald Trump, but giving its anti-incumbent status, I do actually think it could be going back in the likely column and probably trend even more left. But that leaves us with swing states here. Now, I think Minnesota is interesting because I think JD would do way better in the southern part and potentially improve in Hennepin as well, but I just don't think it'd be enough. I think that Gavin probably wins it by just under 2 points. It's probably a 1.5 point win, similar to Clinton's victory in the state. Now, looking at New Jersey, I think that Gavin is going to underperform massively here. I think Vance maybe loses it by 1 to 2. It would be very close, but that's where you kind of see that improvement there with some of the Hispanic groups there. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, it would be the Keystone State again heading into 2028. Now, the thing with JD is that Donald Trump is a very, very big X factor in the Rust Belt and really appeals to certain voters. Now, I do think that it's kind of interesting because Pennsylvania, I think JD would win this, but it would probably be a very close state. It would probably be closer than 2024. Vance would more than likely, looking at the map here, he would probably underperform in some of the suburban areas that moved left. Maybe he matches or just underperforms Trump in some of the rural areas. Erie probably would possibly flip back to Gavin. So I think the state would probably be a little over a point for JD. Michigan, I actually think is going to continue to move in the Republican direction. There's a lot more room to grow. I think JD would do very well with Muslim voters. I think he'd do very well with African American voters. You may see a movement in Detroit continue as well. However, I do think some of those suburban areas that kind of moved left will continue to move that way. Some of these rural areas will probably move left, but some of the major city areas will probably move more Republican, keeping the state at about 1.5 and would actually make it the most Republican Rust Belt state. Now, looking at Wisconsin, and this is the iffy one, right? Wisconsin's interesting because Trump won it by 0.9%. If we look, some of these counties, some of these suburban counties did move left. Now, here's the thing with Gavin. Gavin is an exceptionally bad candidate for the Rust Belt, but given the fact that those suburbs are moving left and the fact that Donald Trump did have a masterclass performance in the Rust Belt, I would actually say that as of right now, going into the election, vice presidents always underperform the top of the ticket from the previous election in the popular vote in the electoral college. I think Gavin probably would narrowly take Wisconsin. Maybe JD would win it because they always all vote together, but maybe Wisconsin does move left enough in those suburbs to narrowly go to Gavin Newsom. So this ends the video out with JD Vance at 302 electoral college votes to Gavin Newsom's 236. Again, guys, this is just using my own intuition from this election and the results that we've gotten, not using Atlas Intel, not using my election model, just using my own basically, historical analysis intel. This is more than likely what the electoral map would be looking like right now. I'd expect a narrow loss for JD in the state of Wisconsin, given that most VPs underperform the top of the ticket, and the fact that it is a very left-trending state, and the fact that Vance is going to gain with Hispanics and African American voters on top of Donald Trump's performance. You may actually see some of those groups kind of make the electorate more depolarized. And again, with college-educated, wide-shifting left, there's a lot of them in the WOW counties, and that would be a big problem for Vance, even with the non-college movement, because the electorate in Wisconsin is about 90% white or higher, and so a leftward movement would be seen in a place like Wisconsin before a Michigan or a Pennsylvania. Again, it's possible that it does vote for Vance, but I would probably give it to Gavin, given his improvement with college whites and the fact that it was such a narrow state in the 2024 election and how most sitting VPs underperform the top of the ticket from the previous election. Hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this, and I will see you guys very, very soon.